Good boy, Max. You found it.
The morning sun filtered softly through the trees, casting a warm, golden glow over the small house nestled at the edge of the quiet neighborhood. Birds chirped peacefully in the distance, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh grass and dew. Inside, a toddler wandered into the living room, barefoot, her small steps quiet against the cool hardwood floor. She was drawn outside, as if the garden itself were calling her. Following closely behind her, a golden retriever padded gently, his tail swaying with a calm, deliberate rhythm. His eyes, warm and knowing, stayed fixed on the little girl as she toddled toward the open door. He didn't rush, nor did he bark. There was a quiet understanding between them, a silent bond that seemed as natural as the sun's rise. As the toddler reached the doorway, she paused and turned to look at the dog, a soft smile lighting up her face. He stopped in his tracks, sitting down by the door, watching her. His gaze was not of protection or command, but something deeper, a sense of quiet connection. The dog's focus was unwavering, as though he knew something the child didn't. Her small hand reached for the doorknob, and just as she was about to open it, the dog nudged his nose against her leg. It was gentle, almost as if to say, "I'm here." The toddler looked up at him, curious but trusting, before slowly opening the door. As the breeze fluttered through, the dog's ears perked up, and his eyes softened as if he felt something shift in the air. What the dog sensed would change everything. The morning light stretched lazily over the small house, casting soft, golden beams through the kitchen window. The air outside was fresh, still cool from the night, but there was a warmth that hinted at the promise of a perfect spring day. Inside, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the subtle sweetness of pancakes and everyday morning, peaceful and full of promise. In the quiet of the kitchen, a toddler stood at the threshold of the living room, looking out at the bright garden. Her name was Emma, and she was just beginning to explore the world beyond the safety of her toys and the walls of the house. Her small feet shuffled across the hardwood floor, her eyes wide with curiosity. She seemed drawn to the door, as if something out there called to her in a language only she understood. Nearby, a dog lay quietly, his golden fur glowing softly in the early light. His name was Max, a calm and thoughtful retriever who had been by Emma's side since the day she was born. His eyes followed her every movement, as though he could sense the world through her tiny, trusting eyes. Max was not just any dog, he was Emma's guardian, her companion, her silent protector. As Emma approached the door, Max lifted his head, his amber eyes alert. He didn't rush toward her, but instead rose slowly, his movements deliberate. It wasn't just a protective instinct that stirred within him, it was something else. Something quieter, deeper. Max padded across the room, his paws making no sound on the floor, and positioned himself beside Emma, just as she reached the door. The toddler paused, looking up at him with a soft smile, as if acknowledging his presence. She reached out, her small fingers curling around the door's handle, but before she could turn it, Max gently nudged her leg with his nose. The touch was soft, almost tender, but his gaze was unwavering, focused on her, on the moment, as though he knew something she didn't. Emma tilted her head, her smile widening, but she didn't hesitate. The door creaked open, and the cool air rushed in, brushing across her skin. Max's ears flicked back, and his gaze softened for a moment, his instincts sharpening, sensing something just beyond their little world. Max didn't bark, didn't growl. He only watched, his gaze deep, almost knowing. The little girl took a step forward, her bare feet brushing the grass outside, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. As if the day was unfolding for something to happen. And then it hit him. Something in the air had changed. Something was shifting. What the dog sensed would change everything. The garden stretched out before them, bathed in the soft, golden light of the morning. The grass was dewy and cool beneath Emma's bare feet, each tiny step leaving an impression in the soft earth. She giggled, bending down to touch the ground, fascinated by the way the blades of grass bent and swayed beneath her fingers. Max stood at her side, a few paces behind, his tail swishing lazily in the breeze. But he wasn't just standing there. His focus, as always, was unwavering. His amber eyes, warm and serene, scanned the yard. No, he wasn't just watching the surroundings. He was looking for something. And there was a softness to his gaze, as though he already knew where to go next. Emma giggled again, pulling a flower from the edge of the yard and bringing it to her face. She sniffed it, her small lips forming a soft mm, as if delighted by the simple joy of a flower in her hands. Max, still standing beside her, didn't move. He watched her, but his attention seemed divided. His head turned slightly, his ears twitching, as if something in the distance had caught his attention. Without warning, Max began to move, not in a hurried rush, but with the same gentle precision as always. His paws made soft impressions in the grass as he padded toward the far side of the yard, his movements purposeful yet calm. Emma, distracted by the beauty of her flower, didn't seem to notice. She pulled her tiny body up to her feet and glanced around, finally spotting the dog's movement. Her eyes lit up, and she took a step forward, calling out, "Maxie, wait!" But Max didn't stop. He slowed down just enough for her to catch up, keeping a small distance between them. He moved with a slow, deliberate pace, and there was something almost magnetic about the way he walked, as though he was guiding her somewhere, but where? The small toddler, her chubby legs moving as fast as they could, tried to match his pace. But it wasn't long before she stopped, staring up at him with wide eyes. She noticed something in the way he moved, something strange and beautiful. He wasn't simply walking ahead of her. He was walking with intent. As if he knew something she didn't. Max paused briefly, turned his head to glance back at Emma, and then continued forward. He didn't make a sound, no bark, no whine. Just his steady, purposeful presence. The warmth of the sun reflected off his golden coat, and for a brief moment, everything in the yard seemed still, quiet, like the world was holding its breath. As Emma caught up with him, her small hand reaching out to rest on his fur, Max slowed once again, lowering his head slightly to meet her eyes. She looked up at him in wonder, feeling an unspoken connection between them. Her smile widened, and she placed her little hand gently on his back. "What is it, Maxie?" she whispered softly, as if sharing a secret with him. Max only tilted his head slightly, as though listening to something far beyond the ordinary. His eyes were soft, but there was a depth in them, a quiet understanding that felt like it belonged to another world. A rustle in the bushes caught their attention, but Max's gaze never wavered. There was no fear, no unease. Just a calm focus, as if he knew that nothing in the world would harm Emma. His body was poised, alert in a way that felt entirely natural. Emma turned her head to follow his gaze, but the yard seemed as empty as before. Only the rustling leaves and the soft chirping of birds filled the air. Yet, for some reason, the moment felt thick with meaning. Max took a step forward again, and Emma, still holding his side, followed him closely. There was no hesitation in her movements. She trusted him with a certainty that went beyond words, an understanding that only grew with each step. But as they moved deeper into the garden, Max's movements became even more purposeful, his pace quickening. Emma, still holding his fur, adjusted her steps to keep up. Her tiny footsteps were light, almost as if the earth itself was guiding her. She felt the pull, the draw of something more, something just beyond their reach, but for now, she didn't question it. She didn't need to. Not with Max by her side. And though the yard was quiet, the air seemed to hum with the silent understanding that something was shifting. Something was waiting for them just ahead. Inside the house, the morning continued with its gentle rhythm. The smell of pancakes lingered in the air as Emma's mother, Sarah, stirred the batter with a wooden spoon, her movements slow and peaceful. She hummed a soft tune to herself, a habit she often carried through her days as she went about the little tasks that made up her life. But today, something felt different. Sarah glanced out the kitchen window, her eyes drawn to the yard. It wasn't the first time she'd looked out to check on Emma and Max, but today there was something unusual in the way the dog was moving. His usual, playful antics were replaced with something more thoughtful, something deliberate. She wiped her hands on her apron and made her way to the back door. She could hear the soft sounds of Emma's giggles and the steady, almost rhythmic sound of Max's paws as he moved across the yard. She opened the door just slightly, leaning out into the cool air to observe them more closely. Max was walking just ahead of Emma, his head held high and his body moving with such purpose that Sarah felt a flicker of curiosity. The dog was not usually so serious, especially with Emma. Usually, they played together, running in circles and chasing after the fluttering leaves, but today was different. Sarah's eyes narrowed, studying the dog's every move. It wasn't that she didn't trust him. Max had been Emma's companion for as long as she could remember. But there was something about the way he moved that felt unusual. Like he was guiding Emma to something, leading her to a place or moment that neither of them could yet understand. She stepped outside quietly, the door closing softly behind her. The sound of her footsteps was drowned out by the soft rustling of the trees and the gentle hum of the world waking up. She made her way to the edge of the porch, her heart light with a mother's gentle concern. Max was usually so easygoing, so full of joy. Why was he acting so differently today? As she walked closer to the yard, Sarah noticed Emma's tiny hand resting on Max's back. It wasn't a playful touch. It wasn't the kind of touch one would give to a dog while running and laughing. It was a soft, almost reverent gesture, as if Emma herself could feel the gravity of the moment. Max paused in his tracks when he heard Sarah's footsteps. He turned slightly to glance at her, his amber eyes filled with a knowing warmth. His gaze lingered on Sarah for a moment, then returned to Emma, his body subtly shifting to lead her forward once more. The quiet exchange between Sarah and Max didn't go unnoticed by Emma. She looked up at Sarah with wide eyes, a smile forming on her small face. "Mommy." "Maxie's showing me the garden," she said, her voice soft but full of wonder. Sarah smiled, though a tiny knot formed in her chest. "I see that, sweetheart," she murmured, moving to stand beside her daughter. Her hand instinctively reached out to rest on Max's head. "He's a good boy," Sarah whispered. Max responded with a soft, contented sigh, his body relaxing under Sarah's touch. He was the picture of calm, but there was something about the way his eyes watched the yard that made Sarah feel uneasy. It wasn't fear, it was more a quiet sense of mystery. "Where are you two headed?" Sarah asked softly, but her words were more a thought spoken aloud than a direct question. She already knew there was no need for an answer. Max wasn't going to tell her anything. He never did. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfolding just beyond their reach. Max turned once again, walking a few more paces ahead, this time toward a small patch of wildflowers hidden behind a row of bushes. It wasn't an area Emma had explored much. The flowers had bloomed only recently, and the space was thick with greenery, untouched by the clamor of childhood play. Sarah watched quietly, her brow furrowing. The air felt different, more still than usual. The wind carried a slight chill, but it didn't seem to bother Emma. She was too fascinated by Max's movements, following him with complete trust. Something was happening, Sarah thought. Something that the dog was aware of, something that, for reasons unknown, he felt was important enough to guide Emma toward. Max stopped in front of the flowers, turning to look at Emma. He seemed to pause for just a moment, his eyes soft but intent. It was as if he were waiting for her to make the next move, to see if she too would recognize whatever quiet understanding he held. Sarah stood back, watching the two of them, her daughter and her dog, so connected in a way she didn't fully understand. And in that moment, she realized that whatever was happening in the garden wasn't a simple game. This was something far deeper, something quieter than she could have imagined. Max was leading Emma somewhere, but why? The question lingered in Sarah's mind, unanswered. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its warmth now fully embracing the garden. The soft hum of the world continued in the background, the chirping of birds, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking. But in the quiet bubble of the yard, time seemed to slow down. The world outside felt distant, as if everything that mattered was right here, in this moment, with Max and Emma. Max had led Emma to the wildflower patch, and she crouched beside him, her small hands brushing the petals of the delicate blooms. The scent of the flowers was sweet, and it filled the air with a peaceful calm. She picked one, holding it close to her nose, and giggled softly as the petals tickled her face. Max, ever watchful, sat down beside her, his posture relaxed but alert. His amber eyes never strayed far from her. It was strange, Sarah thought. How the dog had always been the calm and steady presence in their lives, so unassuming, so present, and yet, today, he seemed to carry a weight of purpose in his movements. His body was still, but there was a quiet intensity in the way he held himself, in the way he waited for Emma to make her next move. The wind stirred the flowers, and Emma reached out to touch them, her fingers lightly brushing the petals. She leaned forward, as if entranced by the delicate beauty in front of her, and Max, sensing her focus, remained perfectly still. Sarah, still standing at the edge of the porch, watched them both. Her heart swelled with a mixture of pride and wonder, but also with a lingering sense of something unspoken, something important. Max was so patient, so calm. He had always been there for Emma, guiding her through the first steps, the first words, the first everything, but today, it was different. He wasn't just being the ever-watchful companion. He was guiding Emma somewhere. To what, though, Sarah couldn't quite grasp. It wasn't just a playful game. There was no chasing of balls, no jumping in excitement. There was no sense of urgency or need for entertainment. Max was in a place of quiet concentration, his presence almost magnetic. His focus on Emma was so singular, so calm, that it was hard to ignore the bond between them. It wasn't just love, it was something deeper. Something profound. Emma, sensing the quiet beauty of the moment, looked up at Max, her small face glowing with a soft smile. "Maxie, you're my best friend," she whispered, her voice gentle, filled with the sweetness of childhood innocence. Max's eyes softened in response, and he nudged her gently with his nose, a subtle gesture of affection. He wasn't one for grand displays of emotion, he never had been, but in his eyes, in the way he leaned into her, there was a clear message. The bond between them was a language that didn't need words. Sarah, moved by the simplicity of the exchange, felt her heart swell. She took a slow step forward, closer to the garden, her breath catching in her chest. The love between Emma and Max was something she'd always known, but now, standing here, she felt it more deeply than ever. It wasn't just the love of a child for a dog, it was something greater. Something timeless. She reached out to rest her hand on the wooden fence at the edge of the garden, her fingers brushing against the cool surface. She wasn't sure what she was waiting for, but the stillness in the air felt important. It felt like a moment of quiet clarity. For the first time, Sarah understood that Max wasn't just a dog to Emma. He was her anchor. Her guide. He was a part of her world in a way that went beyond companionship. He was her protector, her silent partner in the journey of growing up. As Sarah stood there, watching them both, she felt a warmth flood her chest. She could see how Max's gentle guidance was shaping Emma, helping her grow in a way that was almost magical. The dog had always been there, but now he was more than just a pet. He was something else. Something deeper. Max turned his head slightly, as if sensing Sarah's gaze. His amber eyes met hers for a brief moment. It wasn't a direct look, but there was an understanding there, a silent communication. It was as though he was letting her know that everything was fine. That Emma was safe. That all was as it should be. Sarah smiled softly, her heart full. There were no words needed between them, no need for explanations. It was enough to know that, in this quiet moment, the love and bond between Emma and Max were undeniable. But even in this peaceful scene, there was something more that was waiting to be revealed. A deeper connection was forming, one that would take time to understand. Something beyond the flowers, beyond the soft grass beneath their feet. Max, still by Emma's side, gave a small, almost imperceptible nudge with his nose. Emma, without a word, stood up, her small hand reaching for his fur once again. She smiled up at him, her eyes sparkling with trust. Max, as always, guided her forward. The day stretched on, the golden sunlight growing warmer and more intense, casting long shadows across the yard. The wind had picked up, carrying the faint scent of earth and the faint hum of distant voices. But within the boundaries of their little garden, everything was quiet. The outside world had faded, and here, only Emma and Max existed in this serene, timeless space. Max continued to lead Emma through the yard, his steady steps never faltering, never rushing. He wasn't simply walking with her, he was guiding her, each step purposeful, each glance a silent invitation to follow him into the unknown. Emma, now fully attuned to his presence, followed closely behind, her tiny hands still resting on his back, her eyes fixed on the path ahead, even though she didn't yet know where it would lead. Sarah, who had remained by the edge of the porch, watched the pair with quiet fascination. There was something so subtle about the way Max moved. He didn't seem to be guiding Emma toward any specific destination in the traditional sense. He wasn't leading her to the swing set or the sandbox. No, his movements were different. He was drawing her deeper into the very heart of the garden, into the space where nature had flourished unspoken, where the grass grew untamed and the flowers bloomed in quiet seclusion. Max stopped by a small grove of trees, their branches intertwined and full of green leaves, blocking out the bright sunlight. The air here felt cooler, softer, like a secret garden that had been waiting for them. Max paused beneath the shade of the trees, looking back at Emma, waiting for her to join him. Emma hesitated for a moment, sensing the change in the air. Her gaze drifted to the trees, then back to Max, and she took a step forward, her bare feet padding softly against the ground. She moved closer to him, drawn to him with the same trust she had always had. As Emma reached Max's side, the dog's gaze softened even more, and he gently nudged her toward the center of the grove. Emma looked around, her eyes wide with wonder as she saw something nestled among the roots of the trees, an old wooden toy, worn and weathered, half hidden beneath a bed of leaves. It was a forgotten piece of childhood, a toy that Sarah recognized immediately. It had been hers when she was a little girl, a small wooden car with chipped paint and smooth, worn edges. She had loved it deeply, carrying it with her from place to place as she grew. She could barely remember how it had ended up here, tucked away in the garden, as if it had always been meant to be found in this moment. Emma knelt down, her tiny hands reaching for the toy. She paused just before touching it, as if waiting for permission from Max. The dog's eyes met hers, his gaze steady and calm, a silent reassurance that it was okay. When Emma's fingers finally brushed against the wood, it felt like the world around them held its breath. She lifted the toy in her hands, turning it over in her small palms as if trying to remember something that was just beyond her reach. Her brow furrowed slightly, and for a moment, Sarah could see the faintest flicker of recognition in her daughter's eyes. Max, ever the silent guide, stepped back slightly, allowing Emma the space she needed to discover whatever the toy had meant. He wasn't pushing, wasn't forcing her to remember. He simply waited. His presence was a steady comfort, an unspoken invitation to trust in the moment. Emma looked up at Max, her face a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "Maxie, this was yours, wasn't it?" she asked softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. She turned the toy in her hands again, as if searching for something more, something hidden beneath the surface of the worn wood. Max didn't respond with words. Instead, he watched her closely, his gaze never leaving her face. His tail gave a soft wag, a quiet signal of acknowledgement. The moment felt delicate, as though the air itself was filled with the weight of forgotten memories. Sarah, standing on the edge of the yard, felt a gentle pull in her chest. The memory of her toy, came flooding back in fragments. She remembered the joy it had brought her as a child, the simple pleasure of pushing it across the floor, watching it roll. She had forgotten about it, just as she had forgotten many things from her childhood. But here it was, in the hands of her daughter, unearthed by Max's quiet guidance. It was as if Max had known that this moment needed to happen, that Emma needed to find this piece of Sarah's past. That in finding the toy, Emma would unlock something deep within herself. Emma's eyes widened as if she had just unlocked a part of herself, something that had been buried for so long. She turned the toy over again in her hands, her fingers tracing the familiar grooves in the wood. "I remember now," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as the realization hit her. It wasn't just the toy that Emma had rediscovered, it was the memory of her own childhood. A small, forgotten part of the past that had been waiting to be reclaimed. And Max, ever watchful, had led her to it. Max's gaze softened, his job complete. He sat down beside Emma, watching her as she clutched the toy to her chest. It wasn't just a toy, it was a piece of Sarah's history, a piece of her love that had somehow, quietly, found its way back to her daughter. The wind stirred gently, and for a moment, everything was still. The garden, the toy, the bond between them all, everything seemed to fall into place. Max had known. He had always known. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting long, dappled shadows across the yard. A light breeze rustled the leaves, and the gentle hum of the world beyond their garden seemed to fade away. All that mattered was the small circle in which they stood, the dog, the toddler, and the soft, golden light that wrapped around them like a protective cocoon. Max had done it. He had guided Emma to something profound. Something deeply personal, something beyond the simple discovery of an old toy. Sarah had watched it unfold with a quiet, unspoken awe. She had seen the look in Emma's eyes when she touched the toy, when she remembered a piece of her own mother's childhood. There was something sacred in that moment, a bridge between generations, woven together by a quiet, steadfast dog. Emma still held the toy in her small hands, her fingers tracing the worn edges with a reverence that felt almost ancient. Her brow furrowed as she looked at it, then at Max, who sat patiently by her side, his gaze soft but knowing. Max had always been there for Emma, but today felt different. Today, he had become more than just a pet. He had become something much more significant. A guide. A keeper of memories. A bridge to something Emma didn't yet fully understand, but was beginning to sense deep within her. The garden had taken on a different tone, too. The wildflowers, the trees, the quiet hush of the wind, all of it felt like part of a story unfolding, one that Sarah was only just beginning to comprehend. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected that Max's quiet, intuitive nature would lead them to such a deeply emotional turning point. Her heart swelled with pride for Emma, for the way she was learning to trust in the world around her, trusting Max, trusting herself, and now, through this simple toy, connecting to a part of Sarah's own past. It was a connection that felt like it had always been there, waiting for the right moment to surface. But just as Sarah was about to step forward, to join them in the quiet celebration of this revelation, something shifted in the air. The atmosphere, which had felt so warm and safe, suddenly seemed charged with something new. A subtle but unmistakable tension, a quiet undercurrent that Sarah could feel even if she couldn't name it. Max, as always, was the first to sense it. His body, which had been relaxed and calm just moments before, became still. His head lifted, his ears twitching slightly as his gaze swept across the yard. He wasn't looking at Emma. He wasn't even looking at Sarah. His focus had shifted, moving outwards, beyond the garden, as though he was listening for something that none of them could hear. Emma, still holding the toy in her hands, followed Max's gaze, her small face scrunching up in confusion. "Maxie? What is it?" she asked, her voice small but tinged with uncertainty. Max didn't respond with words. He didn't need to. Instead, he slowly stood up, his body moving with the same quiet purpose that had marked his every action today. He took a few slow steps, his gaze never leaving the edge of the yard, where the trees met the open fields beyond. It wasn't fear, Sarah realized, it was something else. Something like recognition. Like Max knew that something, or someone, was about to enter their world. Sarah's heart quickened as she watched the dog move with such intent. There was a slight, soft tension building in the air, subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. She felt it, too, the strange pull of something that wasn't quite explained. It wasn't fear, not at all, but it was different from the peaceful calm that had defined the day so far. Emma, sensing the change in Max's demeanor, slowly stood up. Her tiny hand still clutching the toy, she looked at her mother, her expression full of quiet confusion. "What's happening, Mommy?" she asked, her voice almost too soft to hear. Max turned back briefly to look at her, his amber eyes meeting hers with a deep, almost knowing look. He then turned once more, walking slowly towards the edge of the yard, the unspoken tension in the air urging him forward. His body was poised, not with anxiety, but with the calm of someone who had already made up his mind. He was guiding them somewhere, leading them to something that only he understood. Sarah followed Max's movements with a mixture of awe and curiosity. She knew, deep down, that something was unfolding, something that she wasn't yet prepared to fully grasp. Max had always been more than just a dog to Emma, but now, in this quiet, unspoken moment, Sarah could see how much more he truly was. As Max reached the edge of the yard, he stopped, his head turning slightly as if to beckon them forward. His eyes met Sarah's, and there, in that silent gaze, Sarah understood. He wasn't just leading Emma through the yard. He was leading them both towards something profound. Towards something that would help them all understand the connection they shared, something deeper than either of them had known before. The tension that had built in the air faded as quickly as it had come, but it left behind a sense of quiet anticipation. Max, having stopped at the edge of the yard, turned back toward Emma and Sarah, his posture softening. His work, it seemed, was not yet done. There was still more to be revealed, still more to discover. Max looked at Emma, then Sarah, his amber eyes filled with calm assurance. And in that moment, Sarah felt it, she understood what Max had known all along. He had guided them this far, through the mysteries of the past and the present, and now, as always, he would lead them toward the future. A future full of quiet love, trust, and connection. The garden felt different now. The stillness that had enveloped it for most of the day had shifted, replaced by a quiet expectancy that lingered in the air like a soft breath held in a chest. Max, still standing at the edge of the yard, turned his head one last time to check on Emma and Sarah. His amber eyes gleamed with a quiet confidence, as though he knew that the moment had arrived, the moment when everything would come full circle. Emma, still clutching the small wooden toy in her hands, took a tentative step forward. She glanced up at Max, her gaze full of wonder and confusion. She didn't know what was happening, but she trusted him. She always had. And in this moment, her small, innocent heart could feel the weight of the moment. Something was shifting. Sarah stood a few steps behind her, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. The dog had led them here, into the secret corner of their lives, and now, it seemed, he was preparing to reveal the final piece of the puzzle. What was he guiding them toward? What would they find when they crossed the threshold of this unspoken truth? Max didn't wait for them to follow. With a final, quiet glance back, he moved toward a small patch of earth beneath an ancient oak tree, one that stood at the far corner of the yard. The tree had always been there, its gnarled branches twisting high above, its trunk thick and strong, weathered by time. But today, Sarah felt something different about it, a subtle shift in the air around the tree, as though it had been waiting for them to notice it. Max stopped in front of the oak, his gaze fixed on something that was buried beneath the earth, a small, weathered box half buried in the soil. He sat down beside it, his body still, and turned his head toward Emma, then Sarah, as if to say, "This is it." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The box. It had to be something important. She could feel it in her bones. And as she watched Max, she understood this wasn't just about the toy. It wasn't just about Emma's forgotten memories. It was about something that connected them all. Something that reached back in time, drawing them all into a shared moment. Emma stepped forward slowly, the toy still clutched in her hand, and knelt beside Max. Her small fingers brushed the dirt away from the box. It was old, the wood worn and splintered, but there was a certain reverence in the way she handled it. She looked up at Sarah, as if asking for permission. Sarah, her heart racing, nodded slowly. She had no idea what they were about to discover, but she felt that it was something beautiful, something that would bring them all closer together. Emma, with a deep breath, lifted the box from the earth. She turned it over carefully, her small hands trembling just slightly, and with a quiet click, the box opened. Inside, wrapped in a soft piece of cloth, was a collection of old photographs. Sarah felt a rush of recognition flood over her. These were photographs of her own childhood, pictures she hadn't seen in years. There she was, a little girl, smiling brightly at the camera, holding that very same wooden toy. And beside her, there was a dog. A dog that looked almost identical to Max. It was the same breed, golden retriever, but older, with fur that had been tinged silver by time. Her heart surged in her chest. The realization hit her hard. Max, this dog, he wasn't just any dog. He wasn't simply a companion to Emma. He had been with her family long before Emma had been born. Somehow, he had been a part of Sarah's life before, and now, he was a part of Emma's life, guiding her in ways Sarah hadn't even understood. The photographs were a window into a past that Sarah had long forgotten. There were moments captured in time, her as a child, playing in the yard with that very same dog. The connection between them was undeniable. It was as if Max had always been there, even before Sarah had known him. And now, he was here, guiding Emma in ways that Sarah couldn't explain. He was more than a pet, he was a thread, woven through the fabric of their family, a constant presence that transcended time. As Sarah looked at the photographs, she realized the truth behind Max's presence. He had always been there, watching, waiting, guiding. He had been with Sarah in her childhood, and now he was with Emma. He had a purpose, one that was deeper than anyone had realized. Emma, holding the photographs in her small hands, looked up at Sarah with wide eyes. "Mommy," she whispered, "Maxie is our forever dog, isn't he?" Sarah, her voice thick with emotion, knelt down beside her daughter and wrapped her arms around her. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered, "Maxie has always been with us. And he always will be." Max, sitting calmly beside them, gave a soft wag of his tail, as though he knew that the truth had been revealed. He wasn't just guiding Emma, he had been guiding Sarah, too, leading them all to this moment of understanding. The bond between them was timeless, stretching across generations, woven through memories and quiet, unspoken moments. And in that moment, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Max had been there all along, not just as a dog, but as a guardian, a silent witness to the passage of time. He had connected them all, linking past and present, ensuring that no matter what came next, they would always have this bond. This unbreakable connection, made of love, memory, and the quiet guidance of a dog who had always known. Max, his job complete, sat back down, resting his head on his paws, content. His gaze lingered on Emma and Sarah, and for the first time, Sarah truly understood what Max had been doing all along. He had brought them together, he had brought them home. The evening light had begun to soften, casting a gentle glow over the garden as the sun dipped lower behind the horizon. The air, once warm from the midday sun, had cooled into the comfortable crispness of twilight. The shadows of the trees stretched long across the grass, and the quiet hum of the world around them settled into a peaceful lull. It was a moment of calm, one that felt like a deep, collective breath, shared by Emma, Sarah, and Max. Emma, still holding the photographs, sat beside Max, her small body leaning gently against his side. The wooden toy rested in her lap, a symbol of the past now made whole again. She smiled up at Max, her face soft and filled with an understanding that she had not had just a few hours ago. It was as if the puzzle pieces of her world had fallen into place. Max had always been her protector, her guide, but today, he had shown her something deeper, a link to a past she had never known, and a future filled with love and connection. Max, content and serene, sat quietly beside her, his head resting on his paws. His gaze, though calm and still, held a quiet wisdom, a timeless understanding of the bond between him, Emma, and Sarah. He had led them through the garden, through memories and moments that had shaped their lives, and now, as the day drew to a close, he was simply present, content in the knowledge that his work was done. He had guided them to this place of understanding, where time had connected them all, not just through memories, but through the quiet thread of love that ran through every moment. Sarah stood a few steps away, her hands resting on the wooden fence that marked the edge of the garden. She watched them both, her heart full. The peacefulness of the moment was almost overwhelming. There was no rush, no need for words. Just the presence of family, Max, Emma, and herself, united in this quiet, sacred space. She had always known that Max was special. He had been a part of Emma's life from the beginning, a constant companion and protector. But today, as Sarah watched him sit beside Emma, she realized just how deeply he had woven himself into the fabric of their family. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a bridge between generations, between the past and the present, between the love of a mother and her daughter. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had unfolded that day. She had learned more about Max than she could have ever imagined. And she had learned something about herself, too. She had learned to trust, to believe in the quiet moments, and to understand that sometimes, the most profound connections are the ones that are unspoken. Max lifted his head slightly, his eyes meeting Sarah's for a brief moment. It was a look of quiet reassurance, as if to say, "It's all right. You're all right. We're all right." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she realized the depth of the bond they all shared. She hadn't just watched her daughter grow up with Max, she had watched him guide Emma through the early years of her life, teaching her about love, trust, and the unspoken connection that existed between them. And now, he had helped Emma reconnect with something from Sarah's past, something that had been lost but was now found again. Sarah wiped away a single tear, smiling softly to herself. There was no need for words. Max had always known how to guide them, how to show them the way. And now, as the evening settled into a peaceful quiet, Sarah felt that the mystery, whatever it had been, had finally been resolved. They were a family, bound together not just by blood, but by something deeper. A love that transcended time and space. A bond that no one could break. Emma, still with the photographs in her hands, stood up and walked over to Sarah, her small feet padding softly across the grass. She reached out to her mother, offering her the photos with a smile. "Look, Mommy," she said softly, "Maxie showed me the pictures. He's always been here with us." Sarah took the photographs from Emma, her heart swelling as she looked at the familiar faces in the pictures. There, in her childhood, she saw herself young and carefree, and beside her, the same golden retriever. The same dog that had now been by Emma's side. The same love that had never wavered. Sarah knelt down and pulled Emma into her arms, holding her tightly. Max, sensing the moment, padded over to them and sat at their feet, his body relaxed and content. The family was complete, not because of any grand gestures or spoken words, but because of the quiet, unbreakable bond they shared. The evening grew darker, and the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, casting a soft light over the garden. The night air was cool but comforting, and the world around them seemed to fade into the background as Sarah, Emma, and Max sat together, wrapped in the warmth of their love. The truth was simple, really. Max had always been there. He had always known. And now, so did they. They were a family, together, forever. Max had shown them the way.